Hi, I would like to welcome everyone out to Optimized Dental study group tonight. Today we have Dr. Christie Schmidt, who is an amazing dentist who I've had a ton of experience with and is also a good friend of mine. We're going to go over some interesting topics today because we know that tons of people have been transitioning their practice into a kind of a new digital era and going paperless. And even if they were using some softwares or transitioning from some more outdated software into kind of these new enterprises that are coming out, I thought it was a really great topic to have Dr. Schmidt on because she just went through this recently and going from gold into curve. Cool things about Dr. Schmidt is she's working towards getting course certified. She is done so many different things in her career as far as educating herself in the practice of dentistry, but just also in management. We had the wonderful opportunity of working together at a pretty awesome big clinic. And we really got to kind of go through the whirlwind of growth and expansion and what that looked like and how we kind of transitioned through things, staffing issues, all the wonderful things that the clinic life has to offer. And then she was able to buy her own practice and now is transitioning that one into kind of bringing it up to speed in the digital era, which is just amazing. And we're just so excited to have her on because I think most people have a lot of questions surrounding what it's like to go from less digital office into a fully digital practice, but they don't know where to start. It's very overwhelming. I feel like it can be, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of different avenues in which you can take. And so I think just even exploring this one whole process that Dr. Schmidt did, I think will be enlightening to a few people along the road. And we're just, welcome, Dr. Schmidt. Thank you so much for coming on. And I'd like to turn the time over to you and let you kind of go through your process of what it's been like to transition your practice.
Thank you so much for having me. It's very exciting to be here and getting to share this with everybody because this is not something that I ever thought I would have to do during my dental career or be even pictured the process of doing. So welcome to entering the digital era, the software edition, and it's the process and challenges of going paperless. So first, a little about me. I am a lifelong learner. I went to school for way too long to become a dentist because dentistry was never something that I considered. It turned out that it is my passion, and I'm very lucky that I found something that I love so much. So I went to Western and I graduated in 2015. There was no way that I was going to go to the U of A because I'm from Calgary. And so getting into Western was great. But what I didn't really realize is when you graduate from a different school and you move back home, you lose all of your connections. So I basically had to start from scratch when I moved to Edmonton. And that was a big journey for me. It's not easy to not know any specialists, not know any dentists, have no friends. So luckily, I worked for a couple really good places who kind of introduced me to the dental community. I was an associate for 6 years at 3 different practices. So I feel like I gained a really good knowledge of dentistry from a lot of different perspectives. My first practice was fully digital. So digital charts, scanner, we had our own mill, we had a cone beam. So my learning curve was really, really steep coming straight out of school because we weren't taught any of that in school. So I had to learn how to read cone beam. I learned to place implants. I learned how to make, design, mill my own crowns, learned how to scan, all of that very quickly. I then moved to a practice that was paper-based. So that was a hard transition going back. And I swore that I would never, ever, ever work at a practice that was paper-based again. I moved to a digital practice and spent the next 3.5 years there. So it was on Dentrix. We had a scanner. We didn't mill. We didn't have a cone beam. So I was missing those aspects of dentistry, but the other stuff was enough. And then when I was finally ready to do my own practice, I was looking for a practice that already had all the things that I wanted. Turns out I'm now the owner of Care Dental, which was half of the things I wanted and half of the things that I didn't want. But basically what I did was look at the practice, analyze it, and see if I could make it my own in a reasonable amount of time. So my practice is rural. It's located in Camrose, which is only an hour outside of Edmonton. And I actually still live in South Edmonton and commute every single day, each direction, which is the worst, but the best. It's a lot of time on the road, but it gives me a lot of time to think. I listen to podcasts, solve all of my problems, the usual. There's 11 ops, which sounds pretty big, especially when you look at that picture on that bottom right. The only reason I took on a practice this size is because, like Teresa mentioned, we worked at a very large practice together. And I was there for 3.5 years. So I knew how it ran. I knew how people worked. I knew what I had to do to tackle it. There's 4 dentists, including me, 3 hygienists, 4 front desk, and 10 assistants, which is a lot of staff. And it's a lot of people managing. It's a lot more work than I thought it would be. Like, I knew it would be a lot of work, but that many people are a lot of personalities. So the things that I went over before buying an existing practice and building new were to basically make like a pros and cons list of each and see what I could do with each one. So an existing practice, you've got the cash flow, which is great because banks, that's all they care about. They want to know, can you float this if anything goes wrong? So they look at your cash flow, which you have on an existing. If you're building a practice, you don't have any cash flow. Existing practices come with staff, which is awesome and also terrible because depending on how you structure it, you either inherit all the staff or you get rid of them. And it's always better to keep staff because you want them to be happy. They make your practice run. They know more about it than you do, especially at the beginning, and they know all the patients. So I count that as a bonus. They also bring the goodwill. So the other doctors, if you can have them stay on for at least a little bit, they bring goodwill, but really patients are tied to your staff. That's what I've learned. Existing, you come with equipment, which is also a plus or a minus. You come with equipment. And a lot of mine was not very new. It was new 15 years ago, and it was state of the art then. But now there's some things in disrepair, some stuff that's getting a little bit older, and now you have to pay to fix those things or bring in new things. Existing practice, it comes with established financials. So you don't have to do a lot of work. You have to do some projections, but basically you know how much you make every month. You know how much is going out every month. And the bank loan, you know if you can float it. So it's a lot less stress. Existing, you've got loyalty to the old owners. Staff can be resistant to change. Patients are resistant to change. So it's always interesting going into a practice because I've actually done that twice out of the 3 practices that I worked at, was take over an existing dentist's, I guess 3 times, an existing dentist patient load. So I've had a lot of practice being the new girl, having to walk in, it's the new dentist, the first one that they've seen in 20 years, and having to win them over to your side and show them that even though you do things a little bit differently, it's not necessarily a bad thing and it's not scary, and just kind of win the patients over and also the staff. So you get that with existing. With a new build, you're hiring your own staff. You're picking your own people. They only know you or they're coming to work for you for a reason, which is great, but it's stressful to actually find people who are good. The final thing about an existing practice, buying it, is it's probably not your vision, or it might be dated, or it might not be in the location that you want. But if all those other things take over and they put that as a check inside your good box, then you buy an existing instead of build. So on the flip side, when you build, it's your vision. You get to build what you want. It can be as high tech as you want or as low tech as you want. It's the colors that you want, the layout. You don't get that with an existing. Location, you can build where you want to build. Obviously, you want to build somewhere where you think you're going to have patient growth, which is great. You can build closer to where you want to live. No existing staff. We talked about that. You build your own loyalty. People are loyal to you. You're the first owner. It is harder to get financing, especially for all of those things that you want when you can't prove that you can even pay the bank loan for what you've already paid for. Therefore, it is a bigger financial risk. So at my practice, I analyzed the things that were digital and the things that were not digital. And it turns out that it was a very analog practice. So all of the things that we did, I call it fondly old school, were paper charts, the thing I never, ever was going to do again. We took analog impressions because we did not have a scanner. We had no website. We had no social media. And we actually mailed out our recare reminders on postcards. So that was fun. The modern things that we had were digital radiographs, because I think if it didn't have digital radiographs, I would have keeled over and died. We did have a digital scheduling system, which was gold. We had a computer in each op, so we're set up to be digital. We had intraoral cameras, and we had a cone beam. So all of those were huge pluses, and I can make a website. I can do social media. I know how to scan. I can bring a scanner in. Paper charts, conversion. The one thing, I wasn't sure how it was going to go. So when we went digital, it was a long process. It started with talking with the doctors before I even bought the place, because they all stayed to work with me. So they said, we know we have to go digital, but we don't want to do it. So I let them know we are going to go digital. I'm willing to put in the work. So first off, they were on board. Second off, early on, we let the staff know we're going to go digital. This obviously caused mass panic and fear. And so we let them know it was going to be eventual. We were going to do it down the road. It had to happen eventually, but we weren't going to change anything for a year. So first thing I couldn't live without was a scanner. So in October, I started working there in September. In October, I bought myself a scanner because multiple reasons. Reason one, I wanted one. That's how I want to practice. And I wanted to start that early because I didn't want to do it the old school way for a year. I figured I wouldn't remember how to do anything by then, and I'd have to learn. So jumped right into it, went from a scanning practice to having a scanner in my practice. This also kind of brought in the fun, because the girls were never introduced to anything that was digital before. So they all wanted to play with it. They wanted to be the person who got to use it, who got to scan. And there was actually a lot of excitement around it, which was awesome. Second, we had to move to the digital charting. And that was for both my practice and my staff to help them out. They didn't really realize how much it would help them out at the time. So it was like a big sell. But once they saw the scanner, I think maybe they thought it wouldn't be so bad. So this was gold. It operated on 2 screens, which was the bane of my existence because you had to have both open. On that left-hand side, it would have all the patient information and kind of like the balance, the insurance. And on the right-hand side was what the schedule looked like. And to Gold's credit, it was a very easy system to learn. Like it took me maybe a day to figure it out. And when I had to go from Cleardent to Dentrix, that took me probably 6 months. So Gold was very, right? It takes forever.
Gold is like a very primitive plan or database. And I feel like most clinics go with Gold when they go from, they start to convert into like digital thing, because it's for the clinical side, it's pretty good. Like it does all the things you need to. And then from the admin side, if you just need it as a scheduler, it's enough. But it's so basic that I find that once you get out of that and your clinic is looking to grow, or you start looking into, you've taken COIS courses, so like all of the clinical things you need to do. We're just complying with ADA and C requirements now, all these notes and whatever. And like, there's just no template functions. There's no, things to speed up your time in doing the operation side of your clinician duties or your admin duties. So with such a basic program, it actually slows you down as much as it should speed things up. It actually slows you down for the most part in this. If you're used to coming from Dentrix, Cleardent, even Open Dental, like all of those programs, they are very you can speed your workflow up because there's multiple ways to do things and there's templates, and yeah, Gold is just very, very primitive.
Yes, and that's what I found. And I was actually shocked to discover that we weren't even using Gold to the fullest extent of it. We weren't using any of the tabs on the bottom over here with chart, contact, appointments, none of that. We were really just using this, running pre-auths, and then running everything off the right-hand side.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of a wild thing. There was a lot of confusion on billing. There was poor tracking of stuff. Like there was just no way to find outstanding stuff. We're a non-assignment practice, so I think that was really helpful that we just got most payment on the way out. But there's stuff I'm still finding that hasn't been paid from like 2012.
Yeah, and I find that the providers are really interesting because they have operators, and then even just pulling production numbers and trying to get accurate production numbers, you have to manually calculate them. And the it's like I said, it's a very primitive program. It's great when you start entering into the kind of digital force, if you will. And I think that, when this first came out, it probably was
awesome.
Really, really good. Yeah. But because there's so many really, really good programs out there right now, this is pretty basic. And so I can see how it'd be frustrating coming from a Dentrix program or Cleardent into this and being like, we're not doing anything that we need to be doing at all digitally. So did you guys just use mostly your paper charts then, handwriting everything in? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Which brings us to what I needed in a program. So these are the main 4 things I was looking at: Curve Dental, Dentrix, Open Dental, and Cleardent. I had experience with Cleardent and Dentrix. Open Dental I'd heard was great. I enjoyed Cleardent when I used it, but it was 5 years ago. I was familiar with Dentrix, but I knew there was absolutely 0% chance that my team would be able to learn it. So I really only looked at Curve and Open Dental. I wanted everything on one screen. That toggling between screens was driving me up the wall. And if one wasn't open, it wouldn't connect to the other one. So you had to have both open all of the time. But one always froze on my screen, so I always had to close it. So that was a big no-no for me. I wanted charting, digital imaging, and billing all inside the same program. And I wanted them to be easy to access and understand, because Gold had billing and it had some kind of charting, but it was difficult for my front to understand. No one at the back understood it. It was difficult for me to understand. So I wanted something that was color coded and big across the screen with the odontogram. And I wanted to be able to see previous treatment right underneath it. And I wanted to be able to pull up a note that was related to it. Charting shortcuts, that was one of the questions I asked all the companies. Do you have those? Because Dentrix does. And after that, I couldn't not do it. I needed colors because I'm very color oriented. And I wanted colors for doctors, not colors for procedures. Because when you've got 11 ops on one screen, you need to know where you need to be, not what you're doing. I wanted ease of use and training. That was one really high on my list because I knew it was going to be hard enough to convince the girls to go digital in the first place, much less to something that would take them weeks to learn. I wanted a large volume of users because I wanted stuff to be troubleshooted immediately instead of, oh, well, we'll get to it eventually. Like, no, it needs to be now. I needed it to be cloud-based. So with Gold, I actually had to install a third-party system on a computer in the office and on my laptop. And the computer in the office had to stay on all the time so that I could remote in and open the schedule because it wasn't cloud-based. And since I do a lot of my work after work, I didn't want to have to sit in the office and then drive home an hour. So had to pay for that as an extra. I wanted user tracking because one of the things that I realized was I didn't know who was putting what in the schedule or why. And then I'd go up to the front and I'd ask, hey, anyone know who did this? I just want to know who it's about. And every single person said, I don't know, not me. So I wanted to be able to know who put it in, and then I could go ask them. And I also really wanted a practice evaluation component because I knew that's where my practice had a lot of space to grow. I didn't know if we had a recare system. I didn't know how much money we made every month. I didn't know how many patients we had. I didn't know how many were active. I didn't know anything about my practice. So that was the other really important component for me. So why I chose Curve? Lots of reasons. I had heard of it before. So one of the clinics that I worked at, they had it, and they had it at a different practice, and they loved it, and they considered moving from ClearDent to Curve in our practice. So that already sounded really good. Someone I knew had it, and they'd had it 5 years ago. So it wasn't new on the market. That was one of Open Dental's downsides, is it was newer. It appeared to be simple to use from the outside. It was all very familiar. You've got patients over here. You've got a drop-down menu. You've got your calendar. You've got lots of colors. You've got a whole bunch of stuff. Colors and appearance. I like the way it was laid out on the screen.
It is very similar to Gold for like
Yes.
the way it looks. And I think that's partly why most people moving from an older program like that find it easy to look, because it looks very similar. Like it's got the rounded corners, it looks like bubbly. It's a good like transition of color. It's a good transition of the way it looks, but it has like way more stuff hidden in it.
Yes. There's customization capability too. So you could do whatever you wanted. If you wanted to do color by procedure, you can. It was just not my preference because I like to have my color, and then I like to see where I'm supposed to be when I'm in hygiene, because otherwise I kind of gloss over it because I'm not reading the schedule. It also came with a whole schwack ton of extra features, which made me really, really happy, because the less systems that my staff had to learn, the better. Some extra features were Curve Grow, so you pay extra for that, but it's a whole other system that allows you to have a recare system, automatic reminders, text message communication with your patients, intra-office memos, all kinds of cool stuff. It allowed me also to archive previous users, because that's something that I hated with Dentrix, is every time you went to click what doctor it was or hygienist, every single one who'd ever worked there was there, and you just had to keep adding. With Curve, you can just archive them and then they don't show up anymore. There's also an online booking capability, which is those black lined open spaces. We have not set this up yet, to be fully honest, because I don't completely understand it and I need another training session on it. But it's supposed to link to your website, and then patients can book like emergency appointments or hygiene or stuff like that. And it'll only allow them to do it in those open spaces. And then with Curve Grow, you can actually approve that or reject it based on whether you think it fits in the schedule or not. So it's not just auto added to your schedule. It pops up and you have to approve it. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
That is really good.
Right. Here is a screenshot of Curve Grow. It also has that Recall Max capability. Again, Dentrix was too hard for them to learn, and needing to also buy Recall Max, and then them having to run 2 programs at the same time was just not going to happen in my clinic. So the things that I like about Curve are the texting from Curve Grow. It is awesome. You can text any patient. They respond to you via text and it shows up so anyone can read it. You can follow anything. So if you're working split shifts, for example, you text them in the morning, the night person will also have access to that entire conversation so you don't get lost. There's automatic appointment reminders and confirmations, which are completely customizable. You can customize everything from the time it's sent out, how often it's sent out. You do something called a campaign, and you set it up however you want. and you can do it over text and email. If a patient decides they don't want those things, it's pretty easy to go in and on their profile, you just undo them being able to receive that. So that's great because it's customizable to the patient. There's quick buttons on Curve, which my staff love. They used to have to chart recession by themselves, chips, rotations. Now there's a button, they just click it and then they click the tooth. So they're very excited about that. There's templates, not the way that Dentrix has templates, but I actually kind of prefer them because they're drag and drop. So you don't have to click through an entire thing. You can just make a template for each thing, drag it in, and it pre-populates.
I do really like that Curve drag and drops a lot of things. Like if you have planned appointments, you just grab them and dump them in. They're already there. Like that is so smooth, like so smooth as far as an admin side, like, oh, like a dream.
Right? Surprisingly, that's one of the things my staff had a hard time with, did not enjoy. But I think they love it now that they see how easy it is. But they were used to clicking, click, drag, click, drag. So it took them a while to get used to the drag and drop. Different motion. I really like the task lists for staff because one of the things I didn't have access to in Dentrix, but came through Recall Max was task lists. So if you've got notes for the doctor to read or a referral coming in, or you just want to message the front when you're in the back and say, hey, can you send off this referral for this person? Or can you look into John's appointment next week for sedation or whatever? You just assign the task to the person and then you know if they've done it or not because they can check off if they've done it or not. So that is very awesome. I love the Recare system, the limited amount that I have used it. You can set it up for any interval that you like. It'll send out the automatic Recare reminders. One of my girls at the front is in charge of most of it, and she is rocking it. So I enjoy it. It has that. It also has this really cool function that's an online forms/portal. So you send it to your patient or your new patient before they come in, and they have their own portal. So you send them an email, it pops up with this portal. And in that portal, it has all of their consent forms. It has all of their appointments, all of the stuff for their family if it's set up that way. So they can log into that from anywhere at any time. And then they don't have to call your office and ask when my appointment is. I forget, because they have access to all of it. They can fill out their med history forms in advance. Like, it's just really cool. We're not utilizing it fully yet because we didn't have people's emails. So we're kind of still in the collecting emails phase.
Yeah, I think ClearDent has something similar and Open Dental as well. But yeah, I feel like no one utilizes it at all. Like it's kind of a hidden function. And so then people are like, they have that. I'm like, yeah, they do, but like no one realizes because you have to, you know, and even at the endo practice, we have that. I mean, doctors sign into it, right? Same idea. You have to send them the you know, password and whatever, and then they can log in and then it's there, which is, it's super good because if you can get people utilizing that, then it totally takes a weight off of your front end team. The clinical team has all the information they have before the appointment starts. It's like a huge grab if we can get it going. But yeah, collecting emails takes time, especially coming from patient, you know, paper charts, trying to convert them over. It's a lot.
Yes. We didn't even have the right phone numbers for some people. So
progression over perfection, right, Christie? It just takes time.
Absolutely. I'm like, I just need some way to get a hold of you, and then I'm good. The other thing that I loved about Curve, after having been through so many programs, is the training and the online help resources. It was literally the easiest training I have ever been through. It was extremely thorough, extremely helpful. We kept the trainers late like 4 out of the 6 times to ask questions about stuff we learned previously. And they were so accommodating and helped and were so wonderful. And they didn't have to, and they were on like a time schedule, and they just selflessly gave us their time and helped us to learn how to use this program really well. And I loved that. There's also online help resources. So they call it Curve Community. You can go to it anytime and type in whatever you're trying to do, and it will come up with videos. It'll come up with like step-by-step stuff to do what you're trying to do, to set up anything, to run any report. Anytime you have a question, you can find it there. They've thought of it. So very much appreciate that. It's been very useful for my staff and for me in particular, trying to learn the entire program. When I don't know how to do something, I'm just like, Curve Community, type in what I think the words would be, and it'll pop up with 20 different things. And I picked the one that I was actually looking for and learned about it really quick.
Awesome.
So yes, loved that. The challenges with going paperless were the threats from my staff and patients. There was a lot of, I'm going to quit when we go digital. That's the end for me. Patients, there was no previous expectations in place. So a lot of the practice, no one had filled out a medical history in 20 years. And to ask them to do that and to do it on a tablet was quite the challenge, especially because I have quite a bit of an aging population as my patient base. There's a lot of fear of change, both from the doctors, the staff, and the patients, because this is something completely different. They used to know what their job was. It was to write down what they did. And it was very, very short form, which was a problem for me because you know what our noting standards are now. So they knew that there was a perception of increased workload because they knew that my expectation for charting was much higher, and they didn't know what a template was. They didn't know how easy it would be. So to them, it was really, really scary. So how I did it, I started really, really slow. I started with a scanner. So I got my team using the scanner. I got a couple of the other girls from different teams using the scanner for different things. The doctors were hesitant about using the scanner, so some of them do, some of them don't. But I kind of just introduced, okay, here's technology. Look how easy this is. Remember, you used to have to do a 5-minute impression. Now you can do a scan. So it showed them, okay, not everything new is awful. So that was a really good place to start, and I'm happy I did that. I actually kept my promise of not adding anything for a year. So for the first 6 months, I spent a lot of time learning all of the current systems and finding the holes. And then I knew the weaknesses of what we were working with. And then I knew how to talk to my staff about how much better things would be if I could find them a solution that solved all of those problems for them. So
I'm going to stop you right there. And I think that is some very good management skills, because most people don't want change because it's very much, you put that in your previous slide, of increased perception of workload, and they just don't understand that sometimes you can solve a problem. We don't want them to actually work harder. We just want them to work smarter and be able to do more in less time so that they can breathe and have a conversation and stop and go to the washroom when they need to. And the simple things that need to be done can get done, and it's not as stressful. And if it's easier, you can spend more time with your patients, which allows you to feel like you did a better job. I know that a lot of especially clinicians feel like they don't get that quality patient time because they're trying to get so much done in their appointment. And I get the idea, and I get the purpose of keeping your appointments tight, but we don't want to keep them so tight that we can't have that kind of connection or that patient communication, that value that's added. But with this, if you're not having to do as much, or you can do it without thinking as hard, you can drag and drop and put stuff in while you're having the conversation, or it takes 3 seconds and then you can ask them how their summer was or ask them what's going on. It allows you that space. And I think that's what, the team really needs to feel, because they don't feel like they get that when they're just thinking about all the stuff that they're going to have to learn. And it is, to be fair, it is hard to learn new things. And in the first little bit, it feels like you're fumbling and it's difficult. And then it becomes, muscle memory and gets a bit better. But in the beginning, I can understand the fear behind it. But when you're able to solve those problems, it feels like when you're super supporting them through it, but then also you're allowing them to find more time in their day, which allows them to have more conversations with their teammates, which allows them to have more conversations with their patients, and have a lunch break and deal with all the things that they need to deal with in a day. So that was really, really smart.
Thank you. I also got people on my side. So I identified team members who'd be supportive, and I also identified those who would push back. And I picked 2 team members, one from the front desk and one from the back end, to help with the implementation. So they were my girls who came to every training session. They were like my cheerleaders. So the one in the back was really good friends with another girl who was a little apprehensive. And so she pumped her up. And then I had my team who was also had been digital before, pumping other people up. About a quarter of the practice had worked at a digital office before, and 3/4 hadn't. So I got those ones who had done it to cheerlead it and let everyone know, no, this is easier. This is faster. This does make your life better. Like, we wouldn't just say that. And because I was the new one and they were the trusted ones, it really, really helped for them to be on my side and cheerlead it before it came in. So I did that for probably 3 months before actually implementing it. Got the ball rolling on trying to be positive about it. I also spent a lot of time with my husband, Greg, doing all the work on the front end to make sure the transition was as smooth as possible for everybody. So we did all of the pre-meetings. We did all of the setup, because there was a whole bunch of setup that you did before the training. We were always doing stuff. We were at dinner and we're talking about how we're going to implement things. We're on the phone with Curve being like, here's our systems and how do we get it over? We were there on weekends, especially for when we moved all the data over. We did all that work so that our staff wouldn't have to. So I think that was a big success thing. And we also made the training sessions really fun, like as fun as training can be. Training sucks under all circumstances, but we only had the people necessary for each session because Curve breaks it down between front end and back end. So back end had 3 sessions to attend. Front end had to attend all 6. I'm pretty sure it was 6, might have been 7, to learn how to do it. We brought in food. We did it in 1.5-hour sessions. So we did one on a Saturday. We had people practice. So another cool thing about Curve is they allow you to practice on your fake patient data before you actually go live. So you could practice all of the things so you would know it before day 1, which was really cool. I also added a little bit of, I want to call it a dose of reality. So, for example, our charting was absolutely atrocious. I would go into patients that I had never met and I would just look stupid because I didn't know what was done because the last note said 27XO. And that's it. Like, no freezing, no, did they get a stitch? Nothing, 27XO. So what I had the staff do was write out what a proper note would be. So I kind of walked them through what's required by our college. I was like, anytime you administer a drug to someone, you have to write it down. That includes freezing, that includes topical. You have to go over a med history every single time, and you have to write down you did it or it didn't happen. So each assistant wrote out for their doctor what a proper note would be by hand. And then I said, do you want to do this like this for every patient every day? They're like, we don't have time to do that. I'm like, I know, but this is the requirement. So here is a template that I made you because I took all of those notes and I wrote them individually for every dentist for every template and entered them into the computer for them and said, would you like to drag and drop it in, or would you like to write this? Because this is the expectation. And every single one of them said they wanted to drag and drop it. But it's because the expectation wasn't there before. So technically, yes, it was more work to do it properly, but doing it properly was not negotiable. So You either do it properly on paper or you do it properly digitally, and digitally is a lot easier. So once they realized that, things went a lot better. So, things that went well. I bribed them with Backstreet Boys box seat tickets. It wasn't the bribe I expected though, because none of them knew what a box was. So when I told them, I was like, yay, box. And they're all like, Backstreet Boys, yay. And when they got there, they're like, oh my God, this is what a box is. And I'm like, yes, sweethearts, this is what you worked for. So overall adoption of the technology went really well in the end. It took them about a week to figure it out. And then the girl who was most against it came up to me and was like, oh my God, I love this so much. And I think I was in shock. I just looked at her and was like, can you say that again? Can you please? I just need this moment. She rocked it. They are all rocking it. And we are, it was April, end of April. So we're not that far in, and going from paperless to this, they, I think, couldn't go back now. This is all they know, and they are all doing such a great job. Charting accuracy and thoroughness went through the roof, all of them. It's amazing. I can open anything and know exactly what was done. So when I see the patient for an emergency 4 weeks later, because they've got a dry socket or something, I know what happened and I can tell. My favorite is when patients are like, the crown that you just did fell off. And I'm just like, 1 second, please. And I open the notes and it's like, patient was told that we're not going to fix this tooth because blah, blah, blah. And then I get to read it to the patient and they're like, oh, right, that is what was said. So that has helped a lot. And it has really helped the clinic as a whole, because any assistant can go in and any doctor can go in and we can know what's happening, which has then increased teamwork and team cohesiveness, because everyone is able to work together now. It's not like, oh, Erin's the only one who knew that patient. She's the only one who was in the room. That's not an excuse anymore. Now the excuse is, what did the note say? Oh, it said this. Okay, well, go ask the patient what's going on. So people are more willing to help each other because they have more time and they have more time to socialize. And the ones who are having difficulty going digital, the others helped them. They helped them selflessly. They sat down with them. They were patient. So I think that really helped build the team. The reward, we already talked about. The reward went really well, right? And I think it was important to give them something to shoot for too, instead of just being like, well, we're doing this, so get on board. It was like, no, I want to thank you because I know this wasn't easy. I know this was a challenge for you. Thank you for getting on board this bandwagon with me.
Well, I think it's just like, I mean, you and I have worked together and we know what, like when we first started working together, the clinic that we worked at was, the cultural atmosphere was pretty low and it took us a long time to build it up to a good clinical culture. And with that, it's interesting. I love that you're applying the things that we did a little bit, but just maybe on a bigger scale, because my budget was very small. But I feel like it's good things, because if you want to inspire change and you want to inspire positive attitudes throughout change, you have to reward your team. You have to be so positive, and you have to encourage people around you to be positive, so that positivity spreads versus the opposite, which can happen just as quickly from not doing that. So I think a reward was a really clever idea to help keep that positivity going throughout the practice. Because you're right, you could have just said, this is it, we're doing it. And you had to do it. There was very little choice in doing it to get up to, where we needed to be. But I think doing it in a way that they felt like they were a part of it and it wasn't being shoved down their throats. It was something that they got to do and then were rewarded for doing well. That was really, really good.
Yes, and I'm happy that they actually ended up being super stoked on Backstreet Boys.
Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't be?
Right?
Who
Let's
wouldn't
be for real.
Yeah.
The other thing that went well for me, no one else really cares, is the production tracking, schedule organization, reports. Like now I can pull any data that I want at any time from anywhere. Like it's one of my favorite things to know what I'm doing. And it's just a personal thing, but I like to know how many teeth I pulled. And so I can pull a report since May 1st, and I know I've pulled 508 teeth so far this year. And that jazzes me up and makes me excited. And I can see I've done 100 IV sedations since May. So I look back at that IV sedation course and I'm like, well, I've paid for that and it was totally worth it. If it wasn't, that's where I build my practice. Oh, I'm not doing many of these and I really enjoy this. But now I know. I didn't know before. It's just like, well, I think I pull a lot of teeth. I think I do these things. Now I know. I know what my schedule looks like. It's right there in color. I can block off where I want. So love that. And no one quit. So that's awesome.
Winners.
Winner. Everyone made it through. So, of course, when things go well, there are also things that do not go well. So several staff did not do the at-home training. And that was painfully obvious when they came to work and didn't know how to do anything. And it broke my heart for the girls who tried so hard. There was girls who set up study sessions with each other and quizzed each other and would set up a patient. And then the other one would go like do their work and set up something else for the other person. So they tried really hard and the majority did. And the ones who didn't, it was tough because there had to be a little bit of tough love that kind of was like, why don't we know how to do this? And they're like, oh, it's hard for me. And did you do the training? No. Okay. So it opened the door for some sterner conversations. I also had some difficulty with doctor compliance because in pre-Christie world, doctors didn't have to do anything except for dentistry. Like they didn't sign their notes. They did not read their notes. They had nothing to do with computers. They just showed up, did their work, and then left. They didn't print their own day sheets. They didn't do anything. They had pre-made prescription pads, which is an awesome idea if you're on paper. But on this program, you have to actually enter the prescription and then print it so that it's logged under prescriptions. So you can't just give patients paper anymore. So there was some added work on their part. The tasks, they did not enjoy being assigned tasks and having to do it. They're used to paper just being plopped on their desk and then they read it and signed it and then someone took it away and filed it. So that was a bit of a struggle getting them on board. Once they understood why we were doing it and how it actually all integrated, they were a lot more happy to do it, but it was a big change for them. They were used to not doing anything. They still don't sign their notes, but it is what it is. The panoramic machine that we have did not integrate with Curve. So it had to be bridged, and you can open the bridge through Curve, but the pans don't show up in Curve. So you have to save them from Dexys in Curve, which annoys me to no end.
Yeah. That's the only workaround, hey? There's no dang it.
Yeah. So I just have to get a new pan machine. Then it'll be fine. That's my new solution.
Yeah. Oh, that'll work. That'll work.
Right? That'll work. We also had a little bit of a system failure 4 months in. Curve went down North America wide for about, I don't know, I think it was like 2 hours, maybe it was 4 hours. Maybe I pushed it from my mind because I was like, this cannot be happening to me. And the comments came, well, this never happened on Gold. Yeah, because it's not internet based.
Yeah.
So yeah, everything went down and it was a catastrophe. I'm glad it didn't happen in the first month, but it was a point, we hadn't gotten to the point yet where everything was okay. So it was a, well, this would never happen kind of conversation where we then kind of had to be like, it's okay. This is temporary. You can still do your jobs. Like, it's going to be fine. We'll put the payments through later. We'll do the notes later.
I can't tell you how many times Dentrix servers have gone down in my workday working with Dentrix. Like in the last 2 months, I could probably say 10 times Dentrix went down. in multiple practices, right? It happens. It doesn't matter if it's internet based or not. Servers go down, things
Yes.
happen. It's just, yeah, going digital, that is definitely a risk to anything digital.
Yes.
You can print day sheets out the day before, you can do snapshots. There's things that you can do to
Yes.
mitigate that risk. But yeah, it happens. It's nothing you can really prevent. You can't say, this just this is it. We live in a digital world, it's gonna go down sometimes. And yeah, it wouldn't happen if it was on paper, but also you might
Right.
get shut down due to compliance because nothing was on paper in the first place. So it also has its
Exactly.
risks. Yeah.
That's exactly. And that's what I kind of tried to let them know is, yeah, like this sucks in this moment, but also doing things the old way sucked. So let's move on with our lives. And then of course we had internet issues. So our internet went down like a month ago. So had to spend a lot of time upgrading our internet, having Telus out. But when the internet went down, we didn't have anything for, I think it was a day. Yeah, it was not a fun time. But again, that was not Curve's fault. That was the internet's fault. So it happens. And I think we've gotten used to the idea that it will happen. There was less comments about how that would never happen on Gold this time. So that was good. We had, in air quotes, insurance issues. So I think there's a couple insurance companies that don't operate well with Curve, or the girls just didn't know how to utilize it in the early days. But it's funny to me because one of the insurance issues that we had was that it wouldn't send off an insurance claim to somebody's company. It kept bouncing back. And the girls were all mad because they're like, well, when I send it in Gold, it goes. And it was so much easier. Well, turns out that person didn't have insurance and Gold was too dumb to realize that. So it just sent it. So we were never getting paid for that patient. But because Curve realized that it wasn't real, it kept bouncing back. So I'm not sure how many of the issues were because Gold did things like that. So it seemed really easy.
Yeah, there's
Versus,
just no instant feedback, right? Where it's just this is
right?
getting instant feedback. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and let you know something's not right. And the reason isn't because the software is terrible. It's because the claim number is wrong, or that's
yeah,
not their thing anymore, or they're not covered because they don't pay for that insurance company and they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Like, who knows?
yeah. It can
So
all
that's why
happen.
I say that in quotes. Um, Patients really hate online forms when they're old, especially when they haven't been asked to fill out a medical history in 20 years. They get really aggressive and angry.
Mhm.
And the girls at the front had to bear the brunt of it, which was super unfair to them. And I felt really bad. But it is an expectation that you have a medical history every year. And just because we weren't doing it doesn't mean we're not going to do it. And doing that and tablets was supposed to make it easier because you just touch your medical conditions instead of having to remember them all and write them down by hand. But that was not how it was received by patients, unfortunately.
Well, and to be fair, your patient base in rural Alberta is going to be even more adverse to the
Yes.
technological side of that. And I don't feel as if that is going to be much of an issue. In the city, you're going to see a little bit more compliance for that.
Yes.
And yeah, I just feel like the expectation in rural practices is lower in the beginning anyway. So
Yes.
yeah. And let's be real, like after 75, people can say and do whatever they want now. So I fully
Exactly.
embrace it because when I'm 75, that will be me. I will be the crazy lady that doesn't want to fill out her med history form. And that will be
Right.
fine. And that's okay. And I
Right.
hope
And
I hope my kid's gonna be a dentist so that I can, give his clinicians a hard time
oh,
and
do it. And
yeah.
then pull out your cell phone and proceed to show them all videos that you've taken with your cell phone. That's
Yeah.
also digital.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's my follow-up favorite.
Yeah.
And so that was it. So basically, my path forward from here, now that all the hard, I guess, learning curve is done, is working on implementing Curve to its full capacity because it has so much to offer and we're not utilizing it. Like, I'm really excited to figure out how to do online booking because that would save the front so much time, and like holes in hygiene would be filled so much faster. Someone could just go online and then click what time they wanted and then fill that slot for you. So I
It
very
does
much want
work
to do that,
really good in like
right?
even in other systems like Dentrix, and I think Care Crew have it and Recall Max have it, and it does work really slick when your patients get trained to start utilizing it, and
Yes.
then there's going to be some early adopters like me, like I'm midnight, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to book a massage, I'll go book it at midnight because that's when I
Yes.
think about it and I need to get it done, and that's when I have time to book it.
Yes.
And that those are kind of patients that you wouldn't otherwise collect because during office hours they don't maybe have time to call. And if you don't have a very
Yes.
strong recare program, they might not get a text, they might not get connected with, right? Or they might get a text while they're busy and then they forget about it, which also
Yes.
happens to me. So
I also only pick places to go based on their availability that I can schedule online because I don't want to call someone and talk to them and they're like, oh, I have an opening Thursday at 11. And I'm like, well, I work until 5. So do you have anything after 5? And they're like, let's look forward in the schedule 2 weeks. I'm like, okay. And then I'm looking at my schedule and I'm busy. I just want to go online, click the date that I want to come, see what's available, and then click it.
that's true. That's very
So
true.
I think more of us will move that direction over the next 10 years. So that's what I'm banking on, is people like me who don't want to talk to people on the phone and go through that whole back and forth. I also need to eliminate gold from the office completely. So we paid for it for an extra year just because we knew we hadn't transferred all the old balances to the new system because we didn't know which ones were real and which ones weren't real. We didn't
Mhm.
know if all of the data would transfer properly because it wasn't put in the right spots in gold.
Yeah, yeah.
So we wanted access to all of that. So then after a year, we'd have everybody who was going to come pretty much in the right phone number, right email, right address, made sure their history was correct, that kind of stuff. And then I can clear gold on the financial side. I need to create a training manual for future staff. I still have access to all the videos, which is great, but I want, when you hire someone, to just know what we do and why
Yeah.
we do it, and
Yeah,
something
your
that they can reference.
operations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
our flow. So I need to do that, but that's a big job. We're also improving our recare program because we did not have one. So patients would just call us and let us know they wanted to come in, and then we'd say, well, we're booked for 3 months, and they're like, okay, bye, see you never. So we are working on our regulars, having them on a regular recall and coming in when they're supposed to. We're working on having checkups at the same time as hygiene instead of separately because they were separate, which really messes with insurance. Um, we are going to work on acclimating the patients and the staff to using the technology. So now we've got a scanner, which patients are loving. Now we've got digital charting, which staff is loving. We just need to get the patients to adopt the digital charting. They already accepted digital x-rays. One day, maybe I'll get a mill, that kind of stuff. So working on just pushing forward now that we're on this road. And the other big thing we have to do is scan all of the old files that we have into Curve so that A, we can access them from anywhere, and B, I can get them out of my basement. Because pulling charts from the basement is not a good time when you need to know something that happened like 8 years ago because it's implant related and you need to know. I want to be able to do it from my computer wherever I am, open a little file that I've made called old charts and see the scanned chart from anywhere. So that is what we're working on. And that is the end.
Well, it's been quite a process, and there's been a lot of up and downs. You and I have done several Snapchat messages throughout this whole process, so I knew this was going to be a kind of a great time to kind of go over the whole overview because You have done an amazing job. It is not easy. We went from gold to Dentrix at another practice that I was at, and the conversion was incredibly ugly. And we left gold on a computer for a long period of time as well, so we could toggle between the two as needed. And we had paper charts and finally went fully digital. And I'm always so happy. I think where we can like take all of those paper charts that we don't need anymore and put them away. And even when the clinic that we worked at, we went to from paper charts, and into digital, and we can get rid of the paper charts, and we had so much more space, and it was amazing. And the process of growing into the future and like where you're headed is really smart, because digital is where we're headed. We don't have a choice moving forward, and setting your team up for success, and making the changes now and continually to keep up with technology helps your patients know that you're paying attention to what they're doing, providing excellent patient care, but then also making your staff, not have to work as hard and utilize the equipment is just amazing. And I really appreciate you going through all this with me, because it's tricky. It's a tricky process, and it takes a long time, and it's difficult, but I can really appreciate how much effort and time you went into like researching what to do, how to pick the software, how to approach the staff throughout the process. And I know you put a ton of thought and effort into it. And I think that's kind of why you guys have had so much success in it, is because you really thought about every step along the way. And that kind of active management is what's needed when you go through a big change like this, because it's necessary. And like I said before, you could force it down their throats and make it happen, or you could guide them through it. And I feel like that's what you guys did, is just really guided them through it and help them kind of realize that it is going to be better for them long term, and that you can't stay where you are anyway. So you might as well have fun with it and kind of work through it. Yeah, I can just appreciate how much your team went through, and it probably doesn't even fully realize what you went through to get them there. And that's a whole another ball game. So as dentists go through this process, I know that this will help them kind of put a little bit foresight into it, because hindsight's 2020. And if you're able to talk to someone through that, if you knew the things that you would have went through, you might have even done an even better job. But you don't know till you kind of go through it. And I think you're just the type of person that really hyper plans and makes sure that things are all put together, because I know you, and that's who you are. And I think that's great. And this was a big deal, and you should be very proud of where you came. So thank you so much for coming on tonight.